about the architecture of dataguard broker and the advantages of the dataguard broker and how we are going to configure the dataguard broker.
Okay.
Okay. So, dataguard broker is a tool which will help you to manage your dataguard environment. Okay. It is not a tool for you to create the dataguard. Basically, dataguard broker, when you create the dataguard broker as a framework for you, you can manage. So, for example, in the previous classes when we discussed about the the role changes, or maybe when we discussed about the changing the protection mode, we had to do some commands on the primary as well as we have to log on to the standby database and do some commands on the standby. Rather, the dataguard broker helps in managing the dataguard environment from anywhere. Like you can manage your primary database from your production environment, as well as you can manage your production or primary from primary instance as well. Okay.
Okay.
The dataguard broker, when it's being created, there are two ways we can have this dataguard broker. One is that by using the graphical interface, and the other one is that the command line tool. Both will be working in the same way, but the advantage of what the graphical mode or graphical interface got over the command line mode is that graphical mode is available via the enterprise grid control. Okay. So you can even create a standby database by using the dataguard environment on the on the enterprise grid control. So you can say for the discussion purpose, you can say that the graphical mode of the grid control, which is available via the enterprise manager, will help us to create the dataguard environment. But the command line tool, we don't have an option to create a dataguard environment, but you can manage an existing dataguard environment.
Okay.
Is that clear?
Okay.
Yeah. And in the case of the dataguard broker, what happens is that you can manage the parameters, or the environment is coming in such a way that you have something called a dataguard environment. In that one, you have different objects are there, or different objects like a database object, instance object, etc. And then you will be having the properties for the individual objects. So the objects got the properties as well as the objects got a state also. For example, a standby instance got a set of parameters which will be setting in the standby environment. Also, the standby got a state that it is applying the arclog files. Am I clear here?
Yeah.
Okay. And also, the dataguard broker is a mandatory thing if you wanted to have a special technology known as a fast start failover. So fast start failover is a situation where in which you can have the switch over to the standby, or not switch over. It's actually failover will be taking place to the standby automatically if the primary database is down. So for that to be available, but you need to have the dataguard broker environment configured on the on this environment. And for the theoretical purpose, you can have more than multiple databases supported by the dataguard broker. You can have up to 9 standby databases and 1 physical standby database. So for one primary standby database and 9 standby databases are there. In that 9 standby database can be a combination of both physical as well as the logical standby databases. Okay. Now coming to the architecture, or coming to the components of the dataguard broker. So dataguard broker basically working on a client-server technology, or on the client-server technology. On the client side, you have either the graphical interface or you have the command line tool is there. On the server side, basically you have a configuration file. Not only one configuration file, there will be 2 configuration files will be there. That is dg_config_ file 1 as well as file 2. And you have a set of background process, which is the master process of this background process, or another database dataguard monitor or daemon process. And this process will be updating the configuration files. So in this configuration files, you will be having all the dataguard related parameters entered there.
Okay.
Am I clear here?
Yeah.
Okay. So here we in the previous sessions we have seen that we can for a dataguard to be working working, we have or we need to have a set of parameters. Like you should have your log underscore RQ underscore destination 2, as well as the process. We also have to specify which process is responsible for log shipping, like whether it's a RQ or whether it's a log writer. So all these dataguard related parameters can be set by using the dataguard broker. Okay. So another point to be noted on a practical importance is that the dataguard broker, once you enable the dataguard broker, then you should avoid the practice of doing anything by using the command line tools. I mean command lines, or by using the SQL plus commands.
Okay.
Once you have the broker configured on your environment, manage your dataguard using the dataguard broker only.
Okay.
Don't use the SQL commands, especially.
Hello. Hello.
So, as I explained, the thumb rule will be that whenever you're having, or once you created the broker configuration, Oracle is going to keep all the dataguard related parameters in this broker configuration files. Then from then onwards, you should manage by using your dataguard broker commands, not by using the SQL plus commands. Okay. If you manage by using the SQL plus commands, then there will be mismatch between the SP file or the parameter file of the database instances and that of the dataguard broker, and definitely it is going to create the problems at the dataguard configuration.
Okay.
Right. So that's one rule, and second rule to be remembered is that if your dataguard broker environment is broken, I mean if the dataguard environment is not working, it doesn't mean that your dataguard is failed.
Okay.
Okay, you can have the dataguard up and running without any issues even if your dataguard broker configuration is wrong.
Okay.
But at that time, you should manage by the database purely by using the SQL plus commands.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Now coming to the dataguard broker process model. Okay, the only one process, there are a lot of background processes are there in the case of dataguard broker, but the only one process which a DBA will be managing will be the daemon process or dataguard monitor process. So the daemon process, we will be starting the daemon process. Once the daemon process is started, then you should be able to manage it by using the the daemon process will be starting all the other child processes.
Okay.
Right. And the dataguard broker monitor process or daemon process, by default it will be disabled, and you can enable by using the command alter system set dg underscore broker underscore start equal to true. Once you are setting, the daemon process will be started, and it is a dynamically modifiable parameter, and we can easily and that is this process is mandatory for setting up the dataguard broker environment.
Okay, the value would be true or false?
True or false, yeah.
Okay.
This one, sir. Okay. Once the daemon process is started, then the daemon process will be managing all the things. So for example, if you are changing a value for the database instance, for example, you wanted to change the value of the process which will be shipping the redo from primary to standby. You want to change it from the from log writer to the archiver. So what happens is that internally there is an alter system command is taking place on the instance level, right? So the alter system command is going to be get executed on the primary as well as on the standby, and the process which is responsible for updating the SQL commands on the instance is the RSM background process. Okay. That is the resource manager background process is the one who is responsible for running the SQL commands on the primary instance as well as the standby instance on behalf of the daemon process.
Okay.
Okay. And then another point to be noted is that the daemon process or the dataguard broker background process of this primary will be communicated with the data guard broker and background process of the standby. So when this communication is taking place, or the handshake should be taking place, and the responsibility of the handshaking is done by another background process known as the data guard net server background process.
Okay.
Okay. And the so say what you have here that you are if you are looking at the process flow, if you are changing the properties of your primary instance as well as a standby instance, then the primary database, the daemon process, is the one who is responsible for making any changes on the data guard environment. So how the flow is happening is that, say, assume that you are making a change between on the primary as well as the standby. So the daemon process of the primary will interact with the RSM background process on the primary and make the SQL changes.
Okay.
Okay, and then there is a connection or handshake will be taking place between the primary database as well as the standby database. So the one who is responsible for that handshaking is the NSV process.
Okay.
Okay, and then the NSV process will communicate with the DRC process on the standby and then make the changes on the standby instance. For example, the communication handshake is taking place between the NSV process of the primary and the DRC process of the standby, and then the DRC process will be giving instruction to the RSM, will be giving the instruction to the daemon process of the standby, and the daemon process on the standby will be giving the instruction to the RSM process, and the RSM process will initiate the changes on the standby.
I could not hear the last sentence which you said because you're sounding quite low.
Is it low?
You're kind of low.
Let me hold on. So the process flow is happening like the daemon process of the primary will be responsible for making any changes on both the primary as well as standby. So the daemon process of the primary will give the instruction to the RSM process on the primary to make the database changes, and then the RSM process will once the RSM process will make the changes on the primary, then there is a handshake should be taking place, or there is a need to have a handshake between the primary as well as the standby, and the responsibility or the handshake is taking place between the NSV process of the primary and the DRC process of the standby. Okay, once that
it would be the handshake would be required between the net server process. But then the question is like what would happen in the handshake process?
No, so the handshake process, like say, we have to give or just assuming that a situation where you are on your primary database. Okay, you connect to the data guard broker and you are setting a command like edit database prime set property log underscore transport equal to log writer. Okay, so and the next command what you are executing is that you are executing the command on the standby also. You are telling that edit database stand set property equal to sync. That is a command that you are executing on the standby. So the one who is responsible for initiating this transaction or initiating this SQL or this activity is always the primary's daemon process.
Okay.
Okay. Now the daemon process, since the command is executed from the primary's daemon process, or the command is executed from the primary and the daemon process is responsible, then the daemon process should give the instruction to the daemon process on the standby.
Okay.
Got me?
Yeah.
Then the SQL command has to be executed on the standby instance.
Okay.
So the process flow is happening like that. The daemon process is not directly making a handshake between the daemon of the standby. Instead, it with the help of the NSV process on the primary and the DRC process on the standby, the handshake is established and the command is passed to the daemon process on the standby, which is internally executed by the RSM process on the standby.
Okay.
Is that clear?
Yeah.
But we really don't have to know the internal architecture of the daemon process for troubleshooting the data guard broker, because our interaction will be happening only at the level of the daemon process only. All the other things are happening internally.
Okay.
So most of the cases you don't really require the process architecture of the data guard broker, like how we used to know the process architecture of the normal database.
Okay.
That's not really required. Okay, and also once what happens is that once the standby database is brought up, or else once the daemon process on the standby is restarted, the daemon process will be interacting or will be conducting to the daemon process on the standby instance by the NSV DRSV connection pair, and then then daemon process of the primary will check the status of all the standby instances, and then if every standby instances are returning the status as successful, it will tell that the configuration status is success.
Okay.
Now, once the process flow is understood, then comes the dataguard broker configuration files. So as I explained earlier, the dataguard broker got two configuration files. One is the dg_broker_config_ file1 as well as file2. And the default location of the dataguard broker will be your Oracle home / DBS directory, and the name of the dataguard broker, these configuration files will be dr1 then db unique name .dat. For example, if it is prime, then dr prime dot dr1 prime dot dat as well as dr2 prime dot dat. And of course, if we are having a rack instance, as we are having already the parameter files are on shared location, the same way we need to have the dataguard broker configuration files also on the shared location. So most of the method which most of the customers of Oracle doing, who are using the ASM this thing, then it will be under the ASM disk group itself.
Okay.
Now coming to the dataguard broker command line tool, rather than the graphical interface, we will be giving emphasis to the command line tool, because the command line tool will be always available and it doesn't require any additional product. But if you want a true dataguard broker graphical interface, then we should have implemented the dataguard, the enterprise grid control, which is again a different licensed product. So many organizations may not be having that product itself. But the dataguard broker command line is built in. So if you have the license to the dataguard, then you should be having the license to dataguard broker as well.
Okay.
And for the dataguard broker to be working, the dataguard broker command line tools are available on the enterprise edition as well as the client tool. And the compatible parameter should be 10.2.1. And here the important thing is that if you are using the dataguard broker, then you should have your DB unique name set correctly, and then on the listener.ora you should be having a DB unique name. Global database name should be set in such a way that the global database name equal to DB_unique_name _DGMGRL dot domain name. For example, if you have a domain called Wysheid and then the DB unique name is prime, then the global name will be prime _DGMGRL dot Wysheid.
Okay.
Is that clear?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why that is required is that it will help Oracle to whenever you're doing a switchover process, you have to or the dataguard broker has to connect it to the individual database as using the the sysdba privilege. And at any point of time when you're doing the switchover, the standby databases will automatically become the primary database, but primary database will become the role of the standby database.
Okay.
Now what happens is that the standby databases, the new standby database has to be brought in the mount state. So that means Oracle has to connect it to the standby database using the sysdba privilege. For that, the dataguard broker to be connecting, you should have a hard-coded DB unique name, which with the following syntax of DB unique name _DGMGRL dot domain name.
Okay.
Okay, once this is set, then what you need is that you can set up your dg_broker_start equal to true, which will start up the daemon process. And then once you start up the daemon process, you can just type the command dgmgrl from your command prompt, and you will be setting a dgmgrl, or you will be getting a dgmgrl prompt.
Okay.
Like your rman prompt or SQL plus prompt.
Yeah.
So if you're looking in the model, how that dataguard broker is working, as we explained the different process architecture as well as the configuration files, the dataguard broker is got a model at which the different objects are interacting with each other. So the first model or the topmost layer is a configuration object. A configuration object will be having a name, it got a status, and it's got a set of properties. And a configuration object will be created with one or more database object and one or more instance objects.
Okay.
If it is a say, assuming that it's a single instance database with one primary database and one standard database. In that case, and also we can have in a dataguard broker configuration, we can have only one primary database. And then say the configuration object, I'm just giving that Wysheid _ DG. So that is a configuration object. So whenever a configuration object is being created, at that time, the configuration object will be created only with a primary database.
Okay.
Okay. So the primary database is being created. I mean, the configuration is created with the primary database details, and by default, the instance details will be taken from the associated instance from which you are executing the command. For example, whenever you are creating the broker, you will be always creating the broker from the primary database. So what is the name of the database and the associated instance level properties will be automatically selected by the dataguard broker.
Okay.
Okay. So at this stage, we have your primary database, you have database object, which is your primary database, and you have an instance object, which is the instance of the primary database. Now, you can add a standard database. So when you are adding the standard database, all the database related properties of the standard database will be selected, and the associated instance also will be chosen.
Okay.
Next then.
Yeah.
And in the case of the rack, definitely each database will have multiple instances will be there. So all the instance level configuration details will be automatically configured with the instance object of that particular database.
Okay.
And also each object got its own properties there. Apart from that, each object got its own state as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Any questions on this one? On the architecture of the dataguard broker?
No, it looks like, maybe I'll have to again revisit it. But right now I don't have any questions.
You don't have any questions. Okay. But do you have the access to the e-learning library, right?
Yes, I do.